Okay, so now we're going to get down to the, well, the brass tacks, as it were, is putting this all together. So now we're going to take the unit circle and start finding trig ratios with this, particularly sine and cosine to start with. Now, the definitions, this is kind of key. The cosine is defined as the x-coordinate of an angle on the unit circle. So if you're asked to find the cosine, it'll be the cosine of some angle. And then it is the x-coordinate. So really the question is, for the cosine, what is the x-coordinate for this particular angle? The sine is the y-coordinate. What this means is if you think about the xy coordinate, x comma y, right, is that goes in alphabetical order. And cosine and sine works the same way. So if you're thinking about an xy coordinate, xy, that matches to cosine, which is abbreviated with COS, and sine, which is abbreviated SIN, okay? It's one way to remember, keep track of them, okay? Cosine, sine, and XY. Okay, so let's get to some examples, and maybe this will make more sense. So based on the unit circle, so you're going to be asked related to angles on the unit circle, and believe it or not, this is actually pretty simple. So if someone asks you for the cosine of 60 degrees, right? Cosine 60, that would mean you're looking at the x-coordinate at 60 degrees, so it would be equal to 1/2, and that's it. Done. So you have the unit circle, and you just answer the question. So what would the sine of 45 degrees be? Well, you go to 45 degrees, you look at the y value, and that would be the square root of 2 over 2. Now, is it possible to ask for sines, cosines, and tangents of other angles? Well, or sorry, it's just sine. No, I shouldn't have mentioned tangents. Sine, say, of, I don't know, 240 degrees. You find 240 degrees. You find the y value, because it's sine. It's negative root 3 over 2. Okay. So what about the cosine of 180 degrees? Is that possible? Sure, it's an angle between 0 and 360. So that would be the x value, so it would be equal to -1, okay? Now, I will say this much. The sine and cosine are going to range between -1 and 1. So if you're looking at, say, the sine of 90 degrees, that would be the y value at 90 degrees, that goes as high as 1. So that means all your values, sine or cosine, are going to be between -1 and 1. All the rest of these are fractions in between there, okay? So, some other examples. What if you are asked for the sine of, I believe it would be 585 degrees? Well, you'd have to recognize that that is the same as saying sine of some other angle between 0 and 360. In other words, you've got to get it on the unit circle. So because this is more than that, 360, we subtract 360. And we discovered that that's equivalent to the sine of 225 degrees, which is in between 0 and 360. We can find on the unit circle. We look for the y value. It would be negative root 2 over 2. Okay. What about the cosine of negative 90 degrees? Well, that's equivalent to the cosine if we add 360, right, of 270. Remember, another way to go is if you rotate clockwise 90 degrees, you can end up in the same spot, but that would then mean the cosine would be equal to 0. Okay? So even if the angles are more than 360, we know how to deal with them, or if they're less than 0, then we know what to do. And we can still then find the sine and the cosine. Cosine is the x, so cosine of the angle. Now, you're going to see this thing, this theta here, is the x. Sine is the y. This theta, that's theta, is a variable like x, right, that is used to represent angle measures. So because we're talking about the cosine of an angle equaling x, we don't want to use x twice. So that's why we have things like theta, okay? So that's it for sine and cosine.